Alrighty, here we are again, picking up where we left off. We've got the engine running at Foxpine in the VL3. We're going to do a very short sector following the coast here down to Otaki. It's a little airstrip. Here's the township of Otaki. So this flight here you can see takes us through pretty much uncontrolled airspace. The airspace from Haki's control area starts at 2,500 feet, so we'll be well below that. And then once we get close to Paraparaumu, we have really a local traffic area. As I mentioned in the last video, we can get quite a bit of traffic transiting north and south along the coast, but this is an evening flight, so I wouldn't expect there to be too much traffic about. I'm just turning off the nav data so we can have a closer look at the actual route of flight and the VFR landmarks we can expect. We'll get airborne to the west, pretty strong nor'wester today, pretty unsettled conditions in New Zealand. So we'll probably head out over Foxton Beach here over the mouth of the Manawatu River. And then we'll go past Waitariri here, Hokio Beach. We'll see Levin out to our left-hand side to the east. And there's a pretty distinctive lake there, Lake Horowhenua, just to the western side of that. And we'll see the Taurua Ranges there climbing up into the cloud. We've got the small township of Manukau, which we'll probably miss, and a few beaches. The first one prior to getting to Otaki is Waikawa, and then we're into the Wellington region. So Otaki Beach, again similar to Foxton, there's a small village called Otaki Beach, and then the village township itself of Otaki. And the airstrip is just to the south of the town here, so we can see that it's quite a short strip, 1634 orientation. So we'd expect to probably join. I won't do an overhead rejoin. We know it's a strong wind from the northwest, so we'll be landing on runway 34, and we'd fly that as a left-hand pattern, which means that the airfield will be on our left-hand side as we enter a downwind. And we'll pretty much do that over Tohoro here, and then straight in for final for runway 34. And that's the Otaki River will be our big landmark we're looking for, and of course State Highway 1, which we talked about last time, which will continue all the way down towards Paraparaumu and eventually Wellington. Here's Kapiti Island, which I also pointed out as a landmark. So we'll see that on our nose as we transit the coast. On our way south, we'll do this pretty low, certainly below 1,500 feet, maybe even below 1,000 along the coastline here. So without further ado, we'll jump back into the cockpit. Here we go. So as I mentioned, it's fairly late in the day. I've got the time set up at 6:35 local, and this flight should take about half an hour. So it'll be getting pretty late in the day by the time we get there. So I'll just set up my altitude to 1,500 feet so this thing doesn't squawk us at us the whole way down. I'm not going to align the heading bug. So it's really just some quick pre-takeoff checks. So the trim is set, throttle friction we don't have, mixture we don't have, but fuel is on the left-hand tank. Ignition's on both instruments checked. Okay, everything's in the green. All temperatures a little bit lower than it has been, but still quite high, of course. And I've got a bit more gas. I kicked out our right seat passengers, so we've got a bit more gas than we've been carrying on the last two sectors. And the controls, I shall just fix that. Okay, controls full, free and correct. And I actually plugged the pedals in this time, so let's see. I tried to calibrate them so that I can get a bit more control with the brakes, so we'll see if it works. If it doesn't, I'll just have to disconnect them. And the transponder is squawking 1200, and we're in alt. I'll put the fuel pump on. Lights are all on. Hatches and harnesses are secure. We're good to go. So 1229 was Foxpine. Foxpine traffic, Delta Mike Oscar. Rolling runway 27, vacating south. Okay, and we've got flaps 15 set as well. Alright, so parking brake is released. I'm just going to do a quick check of the controls here with the rudder to make sure that's working. Brakes are checked, left brake, right brake. Okay, seems to be working, pretty sensitive. So smoothly through to full power. You can definitely feel a bit of crosswind already. Alright, we're airborne. Touch the brakes, travel the gear. About a 90 knot climb there. And didn't calibrate the altimeter, so there we go. There's about 200 feet. Flaps travel up. So gear is up, flaps are up. Have a good look around here. Beautiful evening. Sun on its way down. Doesn't that look fantastic? Here's the Manawatu River, Kapiti Island in the distance. Quite a bit of cloud over the hills. We'll start our left turn here. And I'll bring that RPM back, power back to about 25 inches. And the RPM is in the green. Above 1,000 feet, fuel pump goes off. Landing lights off. And that's about 1,300 feet, so we'll just settle into level flight here. Get this thing trimmed down. 24 inches for cruise should be absolutely fine. And just trying to find that attitude. Bit of traffic out today. Someone in the Airbus up high, probably on their way to Auckland, somewhere of that nature. Yeah, a bit of turbulence. As we get close to this cloud layer here, we'll pick up a few bumps as well. So I'll just bring the speed back a bit so we're just underneath that yellow arc there, because we do not want to overstretch the aircraft, and it is a pretty windy old day. You can see we've got indicated 120 knots and ground speed's 122, so it's pretty much all crosswind. Bit of surf rolling in there. And so this is tracking towards Waitarere Beach. Should be just left of the nose there. So we've just descended down to about 900 feet. Okay, so there's the first landmark, that's Waitarere Beach, and you can sort of see here where I've got the nose pointing just to the right of the coastline, and you can feel that bit of drift. If you look down into this area here, you'll see you can feel that it's not that easy to tell, but we are tracking with a bit of right to left drift, so there's definitely some westerly component to the wind. And we can even see that here with, if you look at our ground speed, we've got at least 5, if not more, knots of tailwind. So it's mostly crosswind. And this is definitely something we need to take into account. If we just pointed in the way where the destination is, we'd end up way over here because of that crosswind drifting us along. And it is quite difficult to maintain straight and level flight because the turbulence is just causing us to climb and descend. So there's Lake Horowhenua and Levin will be just out there, but because of that cloud cover, it's a bit tricky to see today. So we can't really see the village or the town over there. This town of population's probably something like 10,000 people live over there, maybe more actually. See if we've got a traffic frequency here, should be 1191, but I will see what we can find. Otaki Airport. Yeah, it's also 1229. So we'll stand by on the radio call. We're still 10 or 11 miles to the north. So the lowest that we could legally fly along here is 500 feet. Of course we can do what we like in the sim, but that's the real world law is not below 500 feet or 1,000 feet over a built up area in New Zealand. Pretty windswept bit of coastline. This really is quite stunning, although it's quite flat along this region until you get up into the hills over there. It's a beautiful bit of coast. Quite a wide beach, as you can see. So we're looking at Waikawa Beach. That was our last landmark just prior to reaching Otaki. So it's a very short sector, this one. Sun going down behind the cloud there. You see Kapiti Island. And out in the distance here, this is actually the top of the South Island, so these are the Marlborough Sounds, which we might explore at on a future episode, or future video I should say. 600 feet, so we've just been steadily descending. Because I've got a slightly lower power setting than I usually cruise at, that means the nose attitude is just a bit higher. And that means that when I set the picture that I'd normally have been, that's actually a bit of a descent. So as I mentioned last time, one of the biggest challenges in flying a sim aircraft is the seating position is always a bit different. So it does take a bit of time to get the hang of what level flight is and what level flight in a turn is particularly. Okay, we see Otaki Beach is coming to view here, and here's Otaki village or township itself. And there's a bit of terrain that rises up here just south of Otaki. It's Waikawa Beach, just down below us. So you're coming up in 5 miles to the north of the field, so I'll make a radio call here. Otaki traffic, Delta Mike Oscar, 5 miles northwest, 600 feet to join. Could probably be a bit more specific with a position report like that because we are over the coast and we're going to track via Otaki Beach. You can see the light is really starting to fade now, so you wouldn't want to be flying too much later than this. In aviation we use two terms, I think there's probably nautical as well. It's evening civil twilight, and that is the latest sort of daylight hour really. Evening civil twilight, it's when the centre of the sun is 6 degrees below the horizon, and we call that twilight time as really the beginning of night. So if you're a day VFR pilot, or your aircraft is certified for day flights only, then you must be on the ground by ECT. I'm not entirely sure what ECT is here, but I'd say it's probably around 7, because there's still plenty of daylight, plenty of light left here for us to work with. Okay, so there's Otaki out there, so the Otaki River, and the airfield is actually just on the southern side of the river. We're at 700 feet. And I did mention that we'll join a downwind, so that's pretty much what we'll do. But we might just do a low approach and overshoot and then do a quick lap around the town and then come back in for a landing, seeing as this has been such a short flight. So I can fly this as a low-level circuit, so that will mean that we should be doing that at about 500 feet So things will change slightly. I'll just reduce the power now so we can start to configure. Coming back to 15 inches of manifold pressure and gently descending to 500 feet. And we're looking for the airstrip on our left hand side. It should be out here somewhere. Let me know if you can see it, because I cannot. But it's close. Okay, here's 100 feet. Okay, so the gear's travelling. You should see those lights pretty clearly in this fading lights. Good, 3 greens, and there's actually looks like there's a bit of rain around here. Okay, so 550 feet. We should be abeam the airstrip. I'm just going to lower that wing, see if I can see it. Put a stage of flaps down. So we're low, we've got fading light, and we've got pretty poor visibility. So that's a pretty good recipe for a cock up, actually. So the key things to maintain here is altitude in that turn and my airspeed, particularly as I haven't actually identified the runway yet. So we'll extend towards these hills a bit, and we are getting pushed downwind here with the tailwind. And we definitely don't want to get pushed into those hills, so I'll begin that turn in now. I'm just going to keep this going because we're relatively close to the airfield, even though I haven't spotted it. Because I do not want to fly a base and then extend past it. I'd rather align with the runway. If I have to sidestep across to it, I'd rather do that. Okay, we can actually see on the GPS, so I'll roll out a little bit there. So we're on about a 20-degree intercept for the runway. And I'm not going to configure for full flaps either, because I am expecting the go round. I don't want to get too slow. So you can see in conditions like this, very difficult to see where that airfield is. I still think it's to the right of the nose. Now we know it's south of the river, so at this point, low approach and overshoot be damned, we're just trying to find the airfield. Maintaining height, still at 90 knots. Okay, so it should be very close. Trying to see over the nose is the next challenge. Okay, that could be it there, that orange paddock just left of the nose. In fact, yep, that's it there. Okay, so we found it. Pretty challenging little airstrip to find in these conditions. But once you see it, you wonder how you missed it. Okay, so we'll just line up on the runway there at 500 feet. And at least it's not flying directly into the sun, or else we'd have a lot of trouble finding it. So we'll just fly quite a tight low-level circuit here, and then do the go-round and head back over the town and see if we can find it again. I did say I was going to fly left circuits, didn't I? So there's your first problem. As long as we keep the airfield in sight, we should be in good shape. Still at 500 feet. Okay, and the difference between a low-level circuit at 500 feet and a regular circuit at 1,000 is we don't really fly crosswinds and base turns. We pretty much just fly it as a racetrack pattern. So it gets off the wingtip there, but because of that lighting, it looks awesome, but very difficult to see the airfield. So once we pretty much pass beam the touchdown point, we just start a bit of a glide all the way in. So I've reduced the power. Going to go flaps 38. We'll do a touch and go of this, I think. Wonderful lighting effects. And now we just want to keep that touchdown zone in sight all the way around. We're at 70 knots, so the speed is good. Rate of descent is a bit too high. Okay, because we've reduced our speed, that's meant that I've had to roll level here. So we've got a bit of a tight base as we track back into this headwind. Okay, fading light, so quite a few human factors issues here. Keep that descent going now, keeping an eye on the speed. Going to full RPM. There's a big tree right on the final there, so we'll avoid that. I'll just come in slightly offset. This was a bit like what I was expecting Foxpine to be honest. Okay, now we can start to straighten up. Not too worried about the touchdown point because we are doing a touch and go. As soon as the wheels touch, we'll go for it. Okay, there we go. Flaps travel, and we're airborne. Brakes, gear travels. So I floated a long way, probably should have gone around off that. Pretty close to those trees at the end there. Go flaps up, lower the nose, and we'll climb up pretty much as high as we can really. I think in these conditions, having a bit more altitude will definitely help us to maintain visual contact with the airfield once we get back on the approach. A road bridge there over the Otaki River, but I'm going to climb to 1,000 feet so we can fly over the township. So you can see another factor that's been introduced here is that at 1,000 feet along the coast, it looked like we had quite a bit of daylight, but as soon as we get into a bit of lower visibility with that rain shower and under the cloud, the visibility drops, or the light levels drop markedly. So it's another factor that we always need to be aware of when operating in these types of conditions, is that it looks good from one position, and then you press on and you soon find yourself running out of light and options all at the same time, which is never a good place to be. I'm just going to try and keep that speed under 115 knots. And we'll just maintain 1,000 feet if I can. That's the goal. Bit slack on the radio calls. Otaki traffic. Delta Mike Oscars, overhead Otaki Township, 1,000 feet. We'll be joining long final runway 34. So we're getting quite a bit of sink in the turn there, so I'll try and correct that. And another factor to keep in mind, very easy to forget things like putting the landing gear down when you're doing sort of a non-standard type operation. We're not flying a proper circuit, and we're making it up as we go along, and this is a real challenge that you can find flying the aircraft. If you do not have good habit patterns in terms of your checks, then you can get yourself into trouble because you don't have the normal cues. If you're just relying on the fact that, okay, when I'm downwind, I put my gear down, and then you don't really fly downwind, you just arrive on final, then you can quickly find yourself in a place you do not want to be. So the airfield was over there. I can still see that building. I think that's the airfield. So that building's our key landmark, and the orange runway is pretty distinctive. So in saying all that, we're pretty much on a downwind, so it would be a good idea to put the gear down now, and then it's done. We don't have to worry about it again. It doesn't cause us a huge amount of drag in this aeroplane, so again I'll just try and get that speed back under 115, and then we'll travel the gear. Okay, I think I can still see that building there. Okay, gears travelling. You can forget flaps, you can forget lights, you can forget fuel pumps and all that sort of stuff, but you cannot forget your wheels. That makes it very hard to taxi without them. Okay, so again we are on a long final for 3-4. Finding a lineup is going to be a real challenge here. We can see these visibility and lighting conditions are atrocious. So we'll go flaps 15. Big pitch change, there we go. So that's hands off. Just putting the flaps down causes a massive pitch change. We gained a couple hundred feet just in that process. Okay, I think that's the airfield here. So if that's the case, we're going to be high, aren't we? So bring that power right back. Pretty much just set up a bit of a glide here. Okay, airfield's pretty distinctive. So now that I know where it is, we've got the hangar and the trees at this end, and there's this other building at the other end. So that's defining the length of the runway. So piece of cake. Now I can do it anytime, really. Famous last words. We'll go full flaps here because we do have a bit of altitude to lose. And just for a laugh, I'm going to try flaps 55 today. I won't put it on until short final. and we may well fall out of the sky. Alright, we're out of that little bit of a shower there, which is nice. You can actually see what the hell's going on. Otaki traffic, Delta Mike Oscar is turning final 34, full stop. So the challenge, okay, nice. So that shower's passed, so we've got much better visibility this time. I'm going to aim for this little gap in between the trees here. We've just got this one tree on final, so maybe this time I'll go to the left of it instead of the right. We'll see how that works out for us. It's pretty wide, you know, in a field like this, obviously, I'd rather not hit the trees than aim for this strip in the middle. It doesn't matter if we land to the left because it's just one big grass runway. Okay, it's looking pretty good. We'll go full RPM. So gears down locked, brakes are checked. I'll use my pedals this time. Okay, you can probably go over this tree on the final here, and is left of this the taller one on the right. Right, flaps 55. Let's see what happens. Not much. I'm surprised. Okay, power to idle. Now we'll try and bleed off some of that speed. Get a bit more feel with the rudder pedals. 40 knots. Oh, she definitely flies a lot slower with the flat 55. And it didn't really give me that speed brake effect that I was anticipating. But I'm using brake now, but hardly used any brake. When the landing lights illuminate the ground, you know that it's pretty much getting too dark to be flying if you're not intending to fly at night. So that's about as far as you'd want to push it, I think, and that's just coming up on 7 PM local, 1900 hours. So there you go. That's a little bit of real-time decision making there as we looked at the weather conditions, how we are going to manage operating in fading light. It's cool to see the reflection of the lights on the windows of the building. So there are quite a few cool little details which you really just have to keep your eyes out for, and it just adds to the immersion factor. So we can go fuel pump off, and backup battery off, and transponder to alt. So there's obviously standby. So obviously no one around, so I'm not even bothering with a radio call, as I'll be talking to myself. So I think they do some gliding out of this airfield in real life, so there's probably gliders and a tug plane tied up in there. And we'll just park on this side here so we're out of the wind. Much easier taxiing with pedals, I can tell you. And I can just modulate a bit of brake as well as rudder, so I can turn in there and actually be quite precise with my parking, a lot more so than just using the button on the stick. Is that high tree? Someone needs to cut that bastard down. Is it that one? Or it might be that one. Yeah, I think it's that one. Very dangerous. Who put that there? Alright, parking brake set. We stayed on one fuel tank for that whole sector there, so you can see we've actually created a bit of an imbalance. So if I flew for a bit longer, I'd want to have changed the fuel over. And in fact, another technique which I missed, but in terms of debriefing this flight, I should have changed to the fuller tank prior to the approach. So that meant we've always got the most fuel available. We've still got plenty on board, but it's just a good practice to get into, that you always want to be running from the fullest tank, because if you did let it run dry, you really don't want that to happen on short final or early on the takeoff. Okay, we'll turn the lights off. And I guess that's something worth mentioning that I didn't cover in the last couple of flights. It's always a good idea to have a bit of a debrief on, on your flight. So what went well, what didn't go so well. So I guess in that one, as far as the decision making goes, it's a late condition, so we probably shouldn't have departed into fading light with deteriorating weather like that to an airfield that we haven't been to before. That is very tricky to spot. Radio calls could have been better, and obviously I floated a long way on that first approach, so probably should have gone around earlier than that. That was pushing it a bit. And what was I just talking about? And changing the fuel tank on final as well. But other than that, it was a good exercise, good learning experience, so I hope you might have got something out of this, something to keep in mind when you're operating as well. Most important thing, speed, height, and don't forget the bloody landing gear. Okay? That's the stuff that's going to kill you. So even when the conditions are deteriorating like that, we're still flying the airplane. We're never giving up. We're always keeping our nose up, keeping an eye on the speed and the altitude, and making sure the energy of the airplane is pointed in a safe direction, so away from terrain. We knew we had lots of escape options because the weather was clear at the coast. There's obviously no terrain out on the coast there, so if it really wasn't looking good, then we could just head to the coast and find a better option, whether it was tracking south to Pauparam or back up the coast of Foxton. So that's about it. We'll shut it down, and we will talk to you next time.